Hi, everybody, and welcome to Square Off. There has been a lot of positive response to the appearance of our next Prime Minister. It seems a lot of people around the world are being lost in his dreamy eyes and thick, wavy hair, Eric.
Oh, Liz, these stories are completely juvenile. They should be talking about his policies and issues and intellect instead of judging his handsome looks, which he is. I don't deny that. But it does hurt his credibility, doesn't it? And maybe the country's as well. But we'll debate that later on Square Off.
Now that the Liberals have a majority government, there will no doubt be big changes in the way policy is created in Ottawa. During the Conservatives' tenure, many unpopular laws were enacted that the opposition parties were dead set against.
And the yet-to-be-sworn-in Liberal government will be a big departure from the Tories and their tough-on-crime approach.
And joining us now to discuss the changes that might be coming, we have criminal lawyer Jeff Manishen. He also worked as a Crown attorney. Jeff, the Conservatives passed a lot of controversial laws, as I said, the omnibus crime bill, gun control rules, anti-terrorism bills, etc. So what do you think will be in the crosshairs of the Trudeau government? What's on the top of their list?
I would say, Liz, that Bill C-51 has likely got to be at the top because it's something that has been so significant in the lead up to the election campaign. While Mr. Trudeau indicated he was prepared to support it, to have it passed, he indicated that it was going to be reviewed further should his party ever become the Government of Canada. With the majority, they now have a greater license to be able to review it, and I expect one of the major features we'll see is a much stronger concept of judicial and other oversight of the special powers that police and investigative agencies are going to be allowed to be able to be used to be able to provide the measure of security that the Act is meant to achieve.
You know, Jeff, another one of his big policy items in his campaign was, of course, the legalization of marijuana. Easy to say. Now, how does he actually go about, what is the process for something as pretty big as this?
Well, the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act of Canada is a piece of federal legislation that has been amended in the past, and we've seen changes that the Harper government implemented to be able to increase penalties. There are often changes with respect to what drugs may or may not be included within the schedules and regulations. I expect that we may well need to see some further study, but the likelihood is good that it's not a large jump from the medical marijuana licensing provisions to be able to get to the realm of potential legalization. What you could find is possession of small amounts of marijuana may be removed as an offense under that legislation. How it then gets administered may be another challenge. We may wind up seeing schemes and systems that are used akin to those that we see in the United States with respect to regulation of distribution of marijuana. And it's a major change, but frankly, I remember back when I was in law school in the early 70s, the issue of potential legalization of marijuana was considered back then. The way the Harper government dealt with it, they treated it more seriously and more harshly, as we were seeing a movement in other parts of North America anyway to the exact reverse.
I'm wondering, you know, in Ontario, you can only buy alcohol in government-run stores, the LCBO and the beer store. Could you see marijuana being sold in government-run stores as well?
Sure. We think of it right now, Liz, with respect to a medical marijuana license. There are places where you can have that, actually prescription. There are places where you can have that prescription filled that are government regulated. And I expect that we will see something, we could well see something similar. The concept of a regulatory scheme to be able to provide for the supply or distribution of a product which needs some regulation, such as alcohol or tobacco, is a model that we could see simply extended to marijuana. How it gets done and when it gets done, that may take some period of time, but it's a very clear part of what the Liberals indicated they were going to do, and I expect they'll proceed with it.
You know, prostitution was another, well, is a contentious issue and big on their campaign. So what do you think the Liberals will make? What kind of changes are they going to make there?
I expect they'll go into a further review of the legislation that had been drafted before to really see whether or not it can, in fact, create security risks for people who are engaged in the business of prostitution, to criminalize the behavior of those who might seek their services. That was one of the major criticisms, and I expect we'll see some further study to really determine whether or not that's in the best interest of everyone, in particular the life and liberty and security of people who choose to be engaged in that kind of business activity. So we'll see some further review on that too.
Okay, so Jeff, take us through the process of what happens now if picking and choosing laws and bills that they want to change. What's involved? How long does it take?
I expect, Liz, that what we're going to see is this. We have over the last decade had what I might characterize as piecemeal changes to the criminal code, removing sentencing options, in some instances putting mandatory minimums in others. I characterize it largely as reducing or eliminating judicial discretion, and not on the basis that there was an clearly identified need for it, and as a result, many of the laws were declared unconstitutional. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Government of Canada, and it's nice to call it that now instead of one beginning with somebody's name, goes into a whole criminal code review. We used to have a law reform commission, and that former government did away with that. So I expect, Liz, that what we're going to see is a comprehensive review of the provisions of the criminal code to determine what's been changed that should be restored, what's been changed that could be maintained, and what might be done to be able to ensure that it provides the proper balance between individuals' interests and those for the protection of society. That's one. Another aspect might well be in the judicial appointment process. I think there's a real need for increased diversity in the appointment of people to the bench at the federal level. And so we can see changes there. And another one is increased federal funding to the legal aid plan. That's something that has been under-attended to for many years. So all of these will be developed by the Minister of Justice with his staff and its policy department. We're going to see a lot more care and attention given to legislative changes and whether they would or wouldn't succeed over a constitutional challenge. There's going to be a lot more care and concern. There's going to be a look for evidence to support changes as opposed to saying we think this is what people want.
Okay, so just quickly, how long before we can expect some change?
Oh, I expect
what's the earliest?
It's going to be several months, if not, a year or two, something like the C-51 one may well get the most immediate attention, but it's going to take a while, and I don't think they want to hurry into it. I think they want to make sure that it's a process they're going to embark on comprehensively. But the concept essentially that I, as a criminal lawyer, am looking forward to is a return to a fundamental level of fairness to the process and a respect for the Charter, which I think really has gone wanting for a long time.
You know, Jeff, we only got about a minute, but I want to ask you about this story. There was a decision in the Supreme Court about roadside suspensions for people who blow a warn in a breathalyzer test. Can you explain that case?
Well, what it focused on, Eric, was particularly this. The law in British Columbia had it that if you blew into a roadside screening device and you blew a fail, your license would automatically be suspended for 90 days. You had a very, very limited right of review of it. And you as well would have your vehicle impounded. You'd have to pay some heavy penalties to get it back out. There was a challenge to that on the basis it infringed the person's right to be secure against unreasonable search under the Charter. And the Supreme Court of Canada found that law to be unconstitutional. Now, it existed between 2010 and 2012 in BC. They've amended it. But a small note for here in Ontario. Here it's different. You don't wind up losing your license for 90 days for the administrative driver's license suspension unless you've failed on the more reliable intoxilyzer, or if you've refused to provide a sample at the station.
What's an intoxilyzer?
That's used to be called the breathalyzer. On the other hand, one thing that is present in our Highway Traffic Act, if you blow a warn, and that part, Eric, was not dealt with by the Supreme Court of Canada, you lose your license for anywhere from 3 to 7 to 30 days in Ontario. People don't know it. The Highway Traffic Act provides that if the individual blowing a warn immediately requests a second test, they're entitled to one. And the police don't have to tell them that. They're entitled to one, and the result of the second test, if it's lower, is what governs. So that was an issue in BC for an individual who might have blown a fail and would have been entitled to a second test, and the officer didn't tell them. We have that in Ontario here. You have that right to a second test on a warn. You have to
Good
be.
to know. That's not if you're not too drunk to ask for it.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Jeff Manishen, criminal lawyer. Appreciate your demystifying all this for us. Thank you.
Thanks,
Always
Jeff.
a pleasure.
When we come back, we're hopping in our DeLorean and we are going back to the future.
Eric, we've got a DeLorean? All right. In honor of Back to the Future Day, we're going to ask a futurist what lies ahead.
Ooh.